Hello, welcome to AT&T ThreatTraq for April 26, 2016. This program provides network security highlights, discussion, and countermeasures for cyber threats. Today we're joined by John Markley. Welcome, John.
Thank you. Good morning, afternoon, or evening.
And we have John Hogoboom here.
Yep, here I am.
And we have Manny Ortiz. Welcome, Manny.
Good afternoon.
And I'm Brian Rexroad, and we're going to jump right into it. And the first item here is, first we're going to talk with you, Manny, about, I guess, infiltrating the bad guys.
That's right. Yeah, so so this story...
Now, we didn't do this.
No, we didn't.
Okay. We're not in that
We didn't
business.
do this, right?
No, we didn't do that.
So this is talking about... this goes back to a story from last year. I think back in July, I believe, is when this story first broke, which was the hacking team. So we won't go into too much about like what they were involved. They're basically a company that does. I've heard it called spyware. So we'll just leave it at that. Again, so this was back in July 2015. A hacker decided to basically infiltrate and then subsequently release a bunch of information that he had gathered from the hack. And so that exposure basically, broke, and there was a whole lot of hoopla around it, and a lot of stuff that came out from it. Fast forward to today, this hacker who goes by the handle, and this was a little unclear, so it looks like he goes by, or maybe back in July, he went by Phineas Fisher, and I think now he goes by Hackback today. So he decided to post to Pasteman the entire details of the actual hack. So, for us geeks that love this kind of stuff, great reading. If you've got time, go out and pull it down, because there's some really good detail on exactly what he did. But I'll try to sort of go over sort of the highlights of what he, how he actually went about, doing this actual hack. So he goes into talking about how he thought originally about the hack, like what he was going to use to try to infiltrate the group. So the first thing, obviously, I think a lot of people that think about is phishing email, right? Most popular way to do it. But he thought, well, these guys are probably pretty good at doing that. That's maybe some of the tactics that they use and stuff. So maybe that's not a good way for me to go. So decided to, sort of table that. Let's not go that way. Through his evaluation of what they were using, there wasn't anything that real apparent that came to him of what he could actually use, which was good, from a protection standpoint. But obviously, if you're trying to hack them, not so good. So he actually makes a statement in the Pasteman posting about sometimes the ease of trying to get into companies, and stated something about that a very good percentage of the Fortune 500 companies already have a compromised asset within their environment that you could probably go and buy.
Let me qualify what good percentage means here. You mean the majority?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. So as he was going through this, he considered actually three options. So once he decided that there wasn't an easy way, there wasn't somebody that already had a machine that was compromised within this environment, there were three other ways that he could go. So he thought of, the first one was a 0-day in Joomla, a 0-day in Postfix, or a 0-day in a embedded device that they were using within their network.
So it sounds like this guy has lots of 0 days in his pocket.
Exactly.
Okay.
Or had a lot of time to develop them, because what we'll find out is that he chose the embedded device. Okay. So he ended up going the embedded device route. So he spent the next 2 weeks digging into this embedded device, and so he found a 0-day in this embedded device. Now, he doesn't state what this device is and what he used to get into this device. He's keeping this. But what he did was he used this 0-day to get into the network, and then deployed a backdoor, and then never used that embedded device again. He continued to use his backdoor, obviously leaving it as a safety net just in case he was discovered, right? That he could still come back in via that, because that's much harder to detect when you have somebody writing something against one of your embedded devices. So what he ended up doing was, once he had this backdoor, he just sat in there and just started to listen in on what was happening. The first thing that he finds is he finds a vulnerable MongoDB. a database that unfortunately was not password protected. So basically blank password.
But this is protected on the inside of their company networks, so to speak.
It's inside
Correct.
the enterprise.
Not to say that you shouldn't have
yes.
a password, but people tend to run a little bit looser,
When they think that
right?
no
when they
one's...
think that they've got some insulation of their perimeter defense.
Exactly. So that's what. So he ends up finding this. So he's, like as you said, he's already on the inside. So he finds this. He finds this MongoDB database, and then from this, he learns where their backup systems are within their environment. So key thing for discovery on his end. So what he finds from these backups, in particular, what actually caught his attention was that he found the Exchange Mail server backup. And he ends up extracting the BlackBerry Enterprise server. So he finds the admin account password. And so then basically what he ends up doing is he ends up using this password to escalate his access on a DA server, a domain admin server, where he eventually ends up able to extract all of the domain user passwords. Wow. So now he's got basically a list of all the domain users and all their passwords, which is great when you get to that point. So now what he's doing is just trying to
qualify great here.
Well, yes. So, great in the sense that if I'm the hacker, yes, this is a turning point for me, right?
Yes.
Now he's got access to the email, so now he's reading through the emails. Through reading the emails, he finds out that they actually have a hidden network, right? And this hidden network is where they're storing the source code for their remote control system, which is their surveillance software. So obviously, to him, major jackpot to go after that particular. So what he ends up doing is he takes the domain credentials that he has. He realizes who the top coder within the environment is. It's this guy, Christian Pazzi. I don't know if I'm saying it right. He uses his credentials to basically go in. He basically finds his access to the web interface to the GitLab source code, and basically that was the crown jewels of the hacking team. So once he has that, he basically has everything that he needed to, and then he went subsequently to upload all the email communication that he had already pulled back. He'd already pulled all that stuff back, and then obviously unleashed all the other the code that he had gotten him to.
And just for clarification, Christian Pazzi didn't do anything wrong here. He just happened to be the top coder. And,
he didn't.
Right. Yeah.
Although in the posting he does list out all of the domain users and their passwords.
Yeah.
And I will say, after seeing some of the passwords, they were quite weak.
That happens.
Yeah.
Right. So you need a good, but that wasn't apparently how he got access to those passwords anyway, right? Yeah.
No.
So he has sort of an inside track to this.
Yep.
Well, that's an interesting rundown. A pretty good. It points out several examples of how enterprises really need to be paying attention. First of all, I mean, you don't want to be too dependent on enterprise perimeter. That's just the first layer boundary. It doesn't keep the bad guys out. It just keeps them. Let's say it gives an opportunity for them to show themselves.
Yep.
And then, so the enterprise applications themselves have to be protected properly, and then the flattening of the network, or the ability to get access to the entire enterprise through one credential or access to one domain certainly wouldn't be the best thing. Although you have to really kind of lay out what's going to be appropriate or helpful in terms of partitioning that up.
Yep.
And then, ultimately, if you're going to put all the eggs in one basket, you better protect that basket pretty darn well.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean,
Anything else, John?
I was going to say, I don't know how he transferred the source code and other emails and whatnot that he collected, but as a defender, watching your perimeter
watching
and for anomalous
indicators,
behaviors of lots of traffic leaving all of a sudden are good things to look for.
He did mention that he created a back door that basically protected his
initial.
Yeah, he was using basically probably a remote access tool, and
probably some sort
it was
of
it was probably all going out through the enterprise gateway, so that would have been an opportunity.
And I'm assuming he probably dribbled it out at first, and then once he realized what he had was basically all he needed, he probably at that point just sort of
Yeah.
just jam
We're
it
just
all.
we're just kind of guessing there. But
Right,
it's a
exactly,
possibility.
exactly.
But,
Yeah.
right.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Okay. Well, hopefully some folks can learn a lesson and not become the same kind of victim there.
Yeah.
And the device aspect of it is certainly one. Well, we should probably cover something about device security on here every once in a while. To be facetious.
Especially the embedded devices. Yeah.
Okay, John. John Hogoboom. Let's go to you here. And this is a topic about, I guess, not so much. We cover an awful lot of attack activity, but it's nice to see a little bit of a protection measure. But let's talk a little bit about how good it is.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know how good it is yet and how well adopted it is, but the new USB Type-C specification, when they first connect, it will transfer a lot of information about what the capabilities are of this device, power-wise, because certain USB can be, I forget what it is, like 1.5 volt versus
5 volts.
Yeah, blah, blah, blah.
There's a 12 volt.
Yeah. So there's those different specifications. So they will kind of negotiate with each other before they send power with each other, which is a good thing to help prevent frying things. But one of the interesting angle I thought here is that they have some authentication capabilities when you connect the USB device. So it's almost, in a way, similar to the kind of code signing that you would do with software. So when you plug it in, it's going to exchange almost like an SSL certificate in a way to let them know, and whether it's signed as a trusted signer. So if you're in an enterprise, you could configure your machines in your enterprise to say, I'm not going to allow people to plug in any USB devices that are not exchanging, not signed with my company's key. Like maybe I have a trusted signing key and I can sign it. I don't know if they've really got it all implemented out perfectly yet, but that's the idea behind it.
That makes a lot of sense. We've talked about cases in the past where USB sticks try to fake it out and act like a keyboard, or they can claim that they're a keyboard. You'd, at least in cases like this, or make it harder for that type of thing to happen. You'd have to defeat the signing process.
Right.
Or at least I'm being a little presumptuous here, but I would expect that that's part of what's covered as a part of it.
Right, and we know that USB is also one of the many ways that malware gets on machines, from people sharing keys, going to different places that might be infected. Malware gets dropped on there, and then they go stick it into their home computer or the work computer, and it gets infected. So this could help prevent the spread of malware via USB thumb drives, potentially.
Yeah, that's the part I have a little more of a question about, because if you have a flaw in the device and are able to inject malware into it, I don't think having an authentication process to say this is a known device is necessarily going to protect you from that. But we'll have to see.
Right.
If perhaps you could use the sign to say, you know what, there might be some way that you could say, okay, this is, I don't know if there's any evidence left behind of where it's been, that perhaps you could see that, okay, this is a company device and it had been plugged into a non-company system or something like that.
Yeah, maybe there is a way
to
to say this thumb drive is, company AT&T, and this computer's company AT&T, and they can only connect to each other.
Yeah.
And if you take it to another machine, it won't actually work over
And I think that's the subtlety in all this, is that, I think we were just talking about a little while ago, in the previous episode, about how cryptography really is complicated when you get down to actually applying it and dealing with all the subtleties. That there are certainly some things that it appears are being addressed here, but I'd be really surprised if they're able to address a lot of the scenarios that make USB devices dangerous from a security standpoint.
Well, it's interesting. At least they're trying,
absolutely.
right?
I'm not taking away that. I just want to, what I'm really just I'm obviously playing devil's advocate and challenging it a little bit. And, we haven't studied all the details of this. We don't know exactly what it does and doesn't do. But time will tell whether it really is solving a security problem, or if other steps in evolution need to take place to make that happen.
Right.
Absolutely is moving in the correct direction, in my opinion. If you can reduce the number of things that can be faked, you certainly have a better opportunity to do it securely.
Right.
Yeah. So good story. Thank you for bringing that. So John Markley, let's go to you. And I guess you've been studying a little bit about how applications are being updated, and share with us what you've found.
Yeah, so I don't want to go into a whole lot of detail on each individual topic, on these on app-specific issues. But one of the things that I do on a day-to-day basis is look at the security of applications that we run on mobile devices, and not we personally, but just generally the we is the world community. And the challenge there is that those applications have security issues. I mean, they have features and support and stability as well as security, but the key here is a lot of updates that happen to an app are due to security issues. And I got to thinking, what is the real balance of how people are actually updating apps? And we have tools in to manage devices, the MDM, the mobile device management software packages that are out there, and there's a plethora of good ones out there. And large enterprises especially need to install those and look at the data to say, okay, there's this new vulnerability with application XYZ. How many people are subject to it, and how can I help them? So I did take a look at one of the large enterprise groups here and tried to narrow down and say what applications are like in that top 5, top 10 list and see how well are people actually doing updates. And it's really kind of a fascinating study, and it's not easy to do. I'm going to tell everybody real quick, this is not an easy study to do. No matter how good an MDM is, this is tough to do. If you boil it down to just those apps that people install on their devices, you can see, that Android apps don't get a whole lot. It's about a 50% update to the most current level. And it's a little misleading sometimes because, if I do a study that says, today application, again, XYZ, if it just got an update, I might tell you that, that everybody who's using it isn't on the most current level. Well, it's not real accurate if it just happened today, that latest update, right? But in general, it appears that comparing Apple to Android apps, that Apple people tend to update more frequently. And it's kind of interesting. I mean, it's almost a 2-to-1 in some ways. 80% to 90% to 100% of Apple people keep their apps on up to date, whereas in Android, you see even in the top, in this example, there's one app that's down in the below 20% at the most current level.
Perhaps the question is, and I haven't done a comparison of this, perhaps you have, is the Apple iOS a little more annoying about getting updates put in, or is it? I mean, I said that in a negative way. Obviously, perhaps it's a little more encouraging to do the updates. Any thoughts on that?
There's something to be said about nagware, right? It is good and bad. Apple, in my opinion, Apple tends to give you a better view of my apps need to be updated. If you look at your, even most people that I've seen, their main screen on an Apple phone or Apple device, they have the App Store right there, front and center, and it'll actually give you a little icon that says, I have these number of apps to update. Unfortunately, I've not seen similarly with a Google Android phone a great example of that same type of visible indication of an update. A lot of times it's in the notification center. A lot of times you got to go to manage apps under settings. And if the app itself doesn't tell you that you need to update, I think people are just not knowing that the Android apps need to be updated.
Yeah, that's a good possibility. And Manny's here nodding his head and saying yes.
Well, because that's exactly right. I mean, I think, whenever I've got my device, I hate seeing those little bubbles that have a little number in them.
Right.
I want to get those things out of the way, and the only way to do it is
to clear them.
Right, is to clear them. And with my Android devices, that is actually hidden from me. It's usually in that top left corner, and you have to actually bring that menu down to actually look at the things that you have to update. So it's sort of out of sight, out of mind. So Apple puts it right in your face and says, here it is. If you want this bubble to go away, you need to update.
Here's living proof of what happens when you have out of sight, out of mind. So okay.
So I do recommend to people, that if you're running an Android device, we probably need to do better at educating folks on how to update and when to update. And then if you're running an MDM, keep an eye on this. It tells you, maybe where you have an opportunity to do some better education.
Yeah, so
and
there's
security things are here. I mean, almost every one of these apps have had a security vulnerability at one time.
Yeah, oh, they all do. It's just a matter of whether you know about it or not. So I guess the other aspect of this that I find kind of interesting, and so some apps, I happen to be a Twitter user, for example. I don't think I go through a week and not have some Twitter update that I have to do. In terms of updating the app, it is continuously being updated. I notice it's at say 41% here, whereas compared to, let's take, what is this, a Science Pro calculator or something that happens to be an Apple one, but I wonder if that's ever been updated. And so,
and that's a little misleading. Right. You're exactly right. That particular instance, I don't think they've had an update since like 2014.
Right. So it's never been updated. So it's at 100%. So so there's that almost two ends of the spectrum here. I am not as familiar with Pandora, but just to take those examples, that is, what is the sweet spot for an app provider on how frequently they provide updates so that the users actually do the updates when they're asked to do the updates, or they just say, no, not another one of those, I got better things to do. So anyway, it's just a little observation. I'm not suggesting you should have to study that, but it would be perhaps a good study to share with the app creators to help provide them some guidance on what is the right cycle. You know, I think Microsoft has the monthly updates for their operating systems. Oracle still works on a quarterly update, which in my opinion is way too long, although, you know, for pretty big honking applications, perhaps the application owners, you know, we're talking about servers and databases at this point, but, you know, for folks that are maintaining those applications, perhaps they don't want to be trying to do updates more than quarterly. So, you know, there are a lot of trade-offs involved in this, and, you know, probably worth studying a little bit. What is the right frequency?
Good point.
Yeah, so thank you for bringing that. It inspires some thought beyond the numbers. So, you know, this next story here is one that I found to be kind of interesting here. It's a paper that was written by Martin Georgov. I have probably butchered his name. Forgive me for that. And Vitaly Shmatikov, and he's from Cornell Tech, Martin being an independent researcher. And this is talking about URL shorteners and how they could potentially, inadvertently, I think, compromise security. So the situation here is that most URL shorteners are basically a small shortened domain name, Bitly being one of them. Google has one. There are a number of organizations that have them. Even private organizations have their own sometimes. And then oftentimes what they'll have is perhaps 6 characters as basically I'll call it a directory path on the URL that basically provides a unique URL to point to what would otherwise be a longer URL. And the subtlety here is that sometimes these longer URLs have uniqueness information, maybe a very long string of characters that are going to be very difficult to guess. But what ends up happening is when you shorten that down to say 6 characters of uniqueness, you can scan across all you can brute force guess those and find out what basically you have it point you to these longer URLs, which potentially gets you access to things that you wouldn't otherwise have access to. So they used an example. Actually, they had 2 examples that they worked with. One was actually Microsoft OneDrive, which I don't think this is necessarily any vulnerability associated with Microsoft OneDrive. I think they just used that as an example where they were able to get access to individuals' contents by basically guessing these shortened, brute force guessing these shortened URLs. And 7% of what they were able to get access to was even writable. So you could not only have access to and view the information, you could potentially change the information. And then once you get access to a file and a personal user's drive content, cloud content, you could potentially see all of their other content as well by basically traversing up the directory structure. So that's basically the essence of the story here. The other example that they had was, maybe somebody shares directions or maps or something, which could give information about, perhaps where they live or where they went to. That would be other sensitive information. And, folks are perhaps not concerned about the fact that sharing that information or that they use the shortened URL basically could expose that information. And I'm not sure it's attributable, but in some cases it may be or may not. So one other thing I wanted to point out in addition to the story is just to consider that there are other hazards associated with shortened URLs. that is, I think enterprises have long recognized that malicious content can be hidden, or a malicious link, I should say, could be hidden by a shortened URL. In fact, they can change the shortened URL to different shortened URLs and still have it point to the same malicious content. And I think my impression has been, because I haven't seen a lot of this lately, perhaps it's still going on profusely, but my impression is a lot of the shortened URL providers are kind of looking for the malicious activity and trying to put a damper on that. But that's no guarantee.
Right.
You're basically depending on the integrity of that shortened URL service provider. Nevertheless, interesting paper. We have the link here so you can take a look at the details of it. Certainly worth reading. Okay, so with that, let's go to you, John Markley, and if you'd like to challenge us with the quiz.
Yeah, let's test your knowledge. As I try to do whenever I come on the show, I try to throw something at you that maybe you don't know, or at least you argue with me on whether I have my facts right. So the first question here is a history one, and it goes back to mobile malware. It's the first identified piece of mobile malware was found on what operating system? And of course, people argue and debate this, but the first identified, publicly known, I guess. What operating system would you all think?
Well, my guess.
Go ahead,
I'm
John.
going with B, Symbian.
Symbian. I was going to say Symbian as well. Manny, you're nodding your head.
Yeah, I was thinking Symbian. I was looking also at the Palm OS, but
Yeah,
I originally started with Palm, but Palm wasn't very network connected.
Yeah.
That really kind of almost predates the internet, or at least the recognition that mobile devices should be connected to the networks. So I was going to go with Symbian. So John Markley, what do you think of our conclusion here?
2 thumbs up, guys.
right.
Symbian's it. Cabir, C-A-B-I-R, was the first recognized piece of mobile malware. It turned in skulls. You may remember skulls, where it actually replaced all the little skulls on your screen. But that's the right answer.
Yeah, and Symbian, it turned out to be it was a rampant target for malware, and largely in Asia. That was where at least Symbian was a significant user base for a longer period of time, and so there was a very, I'll call it a incubator for the notion of mobile malware, since the Android and iPhone, iOS, Apple iOS have significantly taken over the market, and to a smaller extent, Windows had some piece of that market. So, okay, next one, John.
Yeah, sure. And I was going to point out too that Symbian was seen a lot in the UK as well. Quite a bit of Symbian malware there. So next question. The term, this is the tricky one. I just warn you. The term broadband best refers to A, any high-speed communications network, B, wireless networking that utilizes multiple channels, C, network connectivity that meets or exceeds gigabit transfers, or D, data communication that requires fiber and other networking components to achieve fast response.
I'm going to go with you first.
Guess, but I'll let Manny go first.
well, I mean, I would. My first tendency is to go with A, just any high-speed communications network. But the mere fact that John said that it was a tricky question, I'm questioning myself now.
He's trying to trick you out of your answer.
I feel
okay,
like
go
I
ahead.
might be wrong too, but I was going to go with A as well.
I have to go with A. So what do you say here, John?
I shouldn't have tried to fool you. Yeah, it is A.
You bluffer, you.
Yeah, well, and it's the problem is of course it's high speed is so subjective and ambiguous. But that is the right answer.
All right, very good.
All right, so let's now test you for sure. I think you guys are gonna get this wrong, but we'll see. Yeah. All right. Bluetooth and NFC, so near field communication, are both short range. What is the typical distance for each? So
Okay.
A, Bluetooth 10 feet, NFC 10 inches. B, Bluetooth 2 feet, NFC 1 foot. 3, Bluetooth 1 foot, NFC 3 feet. Or D, Bluetooth 33 feet and NFC 8 inches.
Yeah. I was looking for the number 17.4 feet. But that's not on here, so I'm going to have to pick another choice, and I'll go ahead and go first. I have to say it's D.
D, right? Yeah.
D.
I'm going with D too, because I know I wander way more than 10 feet with my Bluetooth headset. And it's probably out to 33 feet. That's about how far I can get, I think.
Yeah, that's exactly how I was trying to put it together. It was like, how far do I typically get away from my, I'm going to go with D as well.
All right. So what do you say, John?
The Bluetooth, I should have changed the Bluetooth out because you guys are on track. NFC, I think, would have got you, but it is D and NFC 8 inches. Reality of it is probably it's a lot closer than 8 inches, but that's about the max you can get an NFC.
Yeah, I think that there's probably there are probably a lot of specifications around the testing scenario that basically certifies these things. That this is one of those parameters, and line of sight, and certain orientations of things or whatever. But nevertheless, all right. Thank you very much, John. And so that's our show for today. We'd like to thank you for joining us. And if you'd like to get in touch with us, you can email us at att.threattrak@list.att.com. You can find AT&T ThreatTraq on the AT&T Tech channel, YouTube, as well as an audio podcast on iTunes. Follow us on Twitter. Our handle is at ATT Security. And I'd like to thank you, John Markley Online, for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, John Hogoboom.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Manny Ortiz. You don't have to be sarcastic. Thank you, Manny Ortiz, for joining us today. I'm Brian Rexroad. We'll be back next week with a new episode. And until then, keep your network safe.